2 hours had passed since our 7 p.m. reservation. My wife Ashley hadn't just forgotten our 10th anniversary. She'd forgotten to even check her phone. The waiter approached me with that special look of pity reserved for stood-up guests. "Mr. Collins, would you like me to wrap up the ring box?" I glanced at the velvet box containing the upgraded diamond she'd been hinting about for months. "No, but I would like to see the security footage from the staff entrance." His eyebrows rose. Ashley had been a regular here for business lunches lately, always insisting on using the discreet side entrance because it was closer to her office. "Sir, I'm not sure. Thomas, I've been coming here for 10 years. You catered my wedding." I pulled out my phone, showing him the tracking app I'd installed last week after finding an unfamiliar receipt in her coat. "My wife is in your restaurant right now. Just not with me." He hesitated, then nodded. "Follow me." The restaurant's security feed showed exactly what I'd expected. Ashley slipping in through the service entrance 40 minutes ago, giggling as her business lunch partner guided her to a private dining room with his hand low on her back. I recognized him from her company photos, Marcus Wheeler, the new VP of sales she'd been working late nights with for the past 3 months. "There in the blue room," Thomas said quietly. "It's a standing weekly reservation. Usually Thursdays, but Mr. Wheeler called this morning to change it to today. Said it was a special occasion. My anniversary. They were celebrating my anniversary in the restaurant that had catered my wedding." "The champagne they ordered," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Is it the same as what's on my table?" Thomas checked his tablet. "Yes, sir. Mrs. Collins always says it's her favorite." "Interesting. Since she told me last week she developed an allergy to that brand." I stood up, straightening my tie. "Thomas, I'm going to need a favor." "Of course, sir. First, charge everything they order to my account. And I mean everything." He nodded, understanding dawning in his eyes. "Second, I want you to deliver this to their table." I handed him the ring box. "Tell them it's compliments of the gentleman at table 12. "My table. And you, sir?" I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I'll be at the bar. I want to see their faces when they realize their private celebration isn't so private anymore." Thomas timed it perfectly. I watched from the bar as he approached their private room just as Marcus was pouring their second glass of my champagne. Ashley was sitting closer to him than any business dinner would warrant, her wedding ring noticeably absent. "Compliments of the gentleman at table 12, Thomas announced, placing the velvet box precisely between them. "He specifically requested you open it now." Ashley's face showed confusion, then recognition as she saw the familiar box design from the jeweler she'd been dropping hints about for months. Her hand trembled as she reached for it. "Weird," Marcus said, clearly annoyed at the interruption. "Must be a mistake." "No mistake, sir," Thomas replied smoothly. Mr. Collins was quite specific. The color drained from Ashley's face. "Tom, my husband is here?" "At table 12, madam, though I believe he's moved to the bar now. He thought you might prefer the view from there when you opened his anniversary gift." Marcus straightened his tie nervously. "Anniversary?" "Yes, sir. 10 years today. We catered the wedding, actually. Mrs. Collins always requests the same champagne. Says it reminds her of their first toast as husband and wife." Ashley's hands shook as she opened the box. Inside, instead of the diamond upgrade she'd been hinting about, she found her wedding video USB and a stack of photos. Her and Marcus entering various hotels. Timestamps from their business dinners. Credit card statements showing purchases she thought she'd hidden. "Oh, and Mrs. Collins?" Thomas added, "Your husband asked me to remind you that your mother's birthday dinner is still on for Saturday, though he mentioned the guest list might need adjusting." I watched her face crumple as she realized the implications. Her mother adored me, was always bragging about her successful son-in-law. Finding out about the affair would destroy her, especially learning that Ashley had skipped their anniversary dinner to be with her lover. Marcus tried to salvage the situation. "Look, this is just a business dinner." "Of course, sir," Thomas interrupted. "Though our records show you've had this business dinner every Thursday for the past 3 months. Always with the same champagne. Always on Mr. Collins's corporate account." That was news to Ashley. She turned to Marcus, betrayal flickering across her face. "You've been charging our dates to his company card?" "Actually," I said, finally approaching their table. "He's been charging everything to my account. The hotels too. Amazing what corporate expense tracking software can find these days." Ashley jumped like she'd been shocked. "James, I can explain. The weekly hotel meetings? The champagne I'm supposedly allergic to? Or maybe how you forgot our anniversary to fuck my biggest client." Marcus stood up, puffing out his chest. "Now wait a minute. Sit down, Marcus. Unless you want me to call your wife next. I'm sure she'd love to hear how you've been spending the consulting fees my company pays you." The private dining room had become eerily quiet. Marcus sat back down, his earlier bravado evaporating. Ashley was staring at the photos, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her designer dress. "The one I just realized I'd probably paid for." "How long have you known?" she whispered. "Long enough to get everything documented, including the interesting transfers from our joint account to your new private one." I turned to Marcus. "The one you convinced her to open for your future together." His face went pale. "You can't prove." "Actually, I can. Banking records are fascinating, especially when your wife still uses your birthday as her password. The transfers align perfectly with your Thursday meetings. Almost like you were charging her for your time." Ashley's head snapped up. "What transfers?" "Oh." I smiled coldly. "He didn't tell you what happens to the money you've been moving?" "Show her your phone, Marcus. Show her where her retirement savings really went." "He said it was for our future home," Ashley protested weakly. "The only thing he's been investing in is his gambling debt. Which, by the way, is why he's been charging everything to my corporate account. His credit cards were maxed out months ago." Thomas appeared with a folder. "The receipts you requested, Mr. Collins. All charges to your account from the past 6 months." Ashley grabbed the folder before Marcus could stop her. Her face crumpled as she saw the evidence: hotel rooms, expensive dinners, jewelry she'd thought were gifts from him, all charged to her husband's company. "You used him?" Her voice broke. "Used us?" "Baby, I can explain," Marcus started. "Don't call her baby," I cut in. "She's still my wife. For about—" I checked my watch. 12 more hours. "My lawyer files the papers first thing tomorrow." "Lawyer?" Ashley went even paler. "James, please, we can work this out. Like how you worked out stealing from our accounts. Or how about the credit card you took out in my name?" Marcus tried to stand again. "That was her idea." "Sit down," I snapped. "I'm not finished. The police will want to talk to both of you about that credit card. Identity theft is serious. Almost as serious as embezzlement from a publicly traded company." Now they both looked sick. "That's right," I continued. "The SEC is very interested in how a VP of sales has been manipulating contracts to increase his commission. Almost as interested as they are in the insider trading you convinced my wife to help you with." Ashley started crying. "I didn't know that your boyfriend was using company information you gave him to make illegal trades? The evidence suggests otherwise. Those texts you thought you deleted? Cloud backups are amazing things." Marcus finally broke. "Look, we can make a deal. Like the deal you made with my wife. The one where she empties our accounts while you empty my company's." I placed a USB drive on the table. "Everything's already been sent to the SEC. And Marcus, your wife got copies too. All of them." The next 24 hours were a hurricane of consequences. Marcus was arrested before he could finish his creme brulee. Turns out there was already a warrant out for securities fraud. The SEC had just been waiting for more evidence, which I'd happily provided. Ashley tried damage control, calling everyone we knew with her version of events. Unfortunately for her, I'd spent weeks preparing. Her family already had copies of everything: the photos, the bank statements, the text messages discussing how to hide their affair from clueless James. "Is it true?" her mother demanded when she showed up at our house that night. "You missed your anniversary dinner to be with that criminal?" Ashley was still trying to explain when her father arrived with more bad news. The family trust she was set to inherit? It had a morality clause. Her grandfather had been adamant about protecting the family's reputation. "You're cut off," he said flatly. The trust committee voted unanimously after seeing the evidence. Stealing from your husband, insider trading, identity theft. What were you thinking? Daddy, please. Don't daddy me. You're 40 years old, not 14. You chose this. Now you get to live with it. Marcus's wife Claire was equally unforgiving. She showed up at Ashley's office the next morning, tossing divorce papers on her desk in front of the entire staff. Hope he was worth it, she announced loudly. Because you're both named in the lawsuit. Every penny he stole, every account he emptied. I'm coming for all of it. The company didn't wait for the SEC investigation to conclude. Ashley was escorted out that afternoon, her corporate email already disabled. Her colleagues watched in silence as she carried out her designer handbag, probably the last expensive thing she'd owned for a while. You knew, she accused when she came home to find me changing the locks. You knew about Marcus's gambling, the stolen money. I figured it out when you started moving money from our accounts. Did you really think I wouldn't notice half our retirement savings disappearing? He said he needed it temporarily. For what? More insider trading? Or was it for the sportsbook he's into for 6 figures? I handed her a printout. Here's his real financial statement. The one he didn't show you when he was promising your dream life together. She sank onto the porch steps, staring at the numbers. This can't be right. He said. He said a lot of things. Just like you did. Remember last month when you said we should put the house in your name for tax purposes? Guess that plan's shot now that the SEC is freezing both your assets. My assets? But I didn't. Didn't what? Trade stocks based on confidential information he got from being my client? The texts say otherwise. You two weren't very careful about discussing illegal activities over company phones. Her face crumpled as reality finally hit. What am I supposed to do now? Well, you could start by calling Marcus. Oh wait, he's in custody. Apparently, he tried to flee to the Caymans when he got the SEC notice. Didn't even bother to warn you first. The SEC investigation revealed the full scope of their schemes. Marcus hadn't just been gambling with stolen money. He'd been running a complex fraud operation using my company's inside information. Ashley had been his unwitting accomplice, providing confidential data she thought he was using to plan their future together. His sentencing hearing was on what would have been our next anniversary. Ashley sat alone in the courtroom, watching her lover throw her under the bus in a desperate plea deal. Mrs. Collins was the mastermind, he claimed. She had access to the company data. She set up the trades. Using accounts in your name, his own lawyer corrected tiredly. It wasn't the first time Marcus had tried to shift blame. The judge wasn't impressed. Mr. Wheeler, the evidence shows you've run this same scheme before. 3 other companies, 3 other affairs with employees who could access insider information. This seems to be your pattern. Ashley's face crumbled as she realized she wasn't special, just the latest in a line of women he'd manipulated for profit. The sentence was harsh. 15 years for securities fraud, wire fraud, and money laundering, plus full restitution of stolen funds. Ashley got 5 years probation and hefty fines. Her cooperation, earning her a lighter sentence. Though in her case, the legal punishment was almost redundant. She'd lost everything already. Her parents cut her off completely after discovering she tried to transfer the house into her name to protect it from the SEC. You didn't just betray your husband, her father said. You tried to steal from him too. The divorce was quick, the prenup ironclad. She tried claiming duress, arguing I'd forced her into signing it. The judge's response was scathing. Mrs. Collins, you committed identity theft against your husband while engaging in an affair with his client. Your credibility regarding his character is somewhat compromised. Claire, Marcus's wife, won her lawsuit. Every asset Ashley had left her car, her designer wardrobe, even her precious jewelry collection, was liquidated to help repay Marcus's victims. I heard through mutual friends that she moved back to her hometown, living in a studio apartment and working as a receptionist. The only job she could get with a fraud conviction on her record. The final twist came 6 months later. The SEC investigator called with an update. They'd found Marcus's hidden offshore account, the one where he'd stashed his real money. Guess what we discovered when we traced the transfers? She asked. Every Thursday, like clockwork, He was moving funds out of an account in your wife's name, right after their business meetings. He was charging her for the affair, while charging you for the hotels, double-dipping right up until the end. I had Thomas from Le Bernardin send Ashley the final bill from our anniversary night. Her half of the champagne, the dinner she'd shared with Marcus, and one velvet ring box, still unused. At the bottom, I added a note, "Happy anniversary. Hope it was worth it." The bill was returned unopened. Her new address apparently didn't accept deliveries after 6 p.m. Her apartment wasn't in the kind of neighborhood where you want to leave packages out. The ring? I donated it to a charity auction benefiting victims of investment fraud. It seemed fitting somehow. Something beautiful coming from all that betrayal. Just like our anniversary dinner, Ashley never did manage to accept delivery of what she'd earned. Thank you for listening the story to the end. Write your thoughts about it in the comments and do not forget to subscribe. See you in the next videos.